Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Med Device Cyber Podcast. Today we have a guest, Kevin from Zapyrus, and we're going to be talking about a little bit about market intelligence and how it ties into cybersecurity. And we're excited to talk about his SaaS platform, which has changed marketing and the industry quite a bit. It's very forward-thinking because it's very focused on MedTech. So welcome to the podcast, Kevin, and you're coming to us from right outside Toronto. Is that right today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited today to spend some time together and have some fun.
Awesome. Well, you want to tell us a little bit about your background in the industry, Kevin, and maybe like what the impetus was for Zapyrus and how things are going for you today?
I came from the research world in the early days, so technical space, right? My PhD was in chemistry, technically. But translational chemistry. So I was focusing on the application side of things. So developing portable diagnostic devices, instrumentation, nano fabrication. I was in the clean room all the time, doing tissue engineering work as well, which, we're starting to see a bunch of new cool companies come out through the innovation of those materials and technologies out of universities. So that was kind of my roots. And then I got super curious in the entrepreneurial side because through that work, I was able to publish some patents, papers and things like that, and wanted to see kind of how do you take it beyond that and create larger impact in the community, in the space. And that took me into the startup world. Spent some time in France working at a liquid biopsy company there. I was a chief operating officer there, raising capital, doing all the fun startup stuff or broke startup stuff that's you're, bitching, begging for VC money and things like that. So that was like pre-COVID. Post-COVID, came back to Canada, and then shortly after, Zapyrus was born out of COVID, and we've been scaling out ever since. So,
and how did you see like the need to start Zapyrus? Like, what was the reason you basically built Zapyrus? Like, what was the need you felt needed to be filled?
Yeah. So at the time, I look at the healthcare space as a whole, right? Healthcare space, we can break it up into pharma, biotech, and then we've got like MedTech and then consumer healthcare stuff, right? And so MedTech, from a regulatory sophistication, like sales sophistication, company sophistication, is historically has been, minimum 5 years behind life sciences, like pharma and biotech, right? From a regulatory standpoint.
So just to be clear, you're saying you feel like the MedTech industry is 5 years behind pharma for regulatory?
A variety of different things. Yeah, it starts with the regulatory, and then it bleeds down into the innovations, tools used in the space, sales team structure and sophistication. Just by the nature of investment into that vertical, you're going to get more, polished systems and processes in companies, right? And so at the time, in the biotech space, there were a lot of cool solutions that help more efficiently and effectively connect businesses together, B2B, like through market intelligence. And so there's this transition between, I guess, going to the library to get information to like the internet, right? It's like the Google age and the Yahoo, searching age. So the information age, then what was born out of that were traditional databases, basically digitized curation of information in a platform, right? And then you saw the emergence of like selling contacts. That was such a taboo, like there are firms that are just scraping in people's contact info in the early days. Think about like Zoom info in the early days. They're installing like crawlers in people's browsers and like taking contacts out of people's emails unwarranted, and then regulation caught up and like, you can't do that anymore. And so now, and then all of a sudden overnight, their contacts quality plummet because they're not allowed to like do that thing anymore. And so then it became the emergence of like the database platforms and then the contact search platforms, right? And these were all fragmented solutions that's aimed to try to help out the business developers and marketers in the space to be able to grow their business more effectively beyond just going to conferences, shaking hands, word of mouth, and just like SEO marketing stuff, right? Inbound things. And so what we saw was like a gap to be able to do that in a niche industry to help MedTech service providers specifically centralize all of the jobs to be done and automate a lot of the pieces that are involved in business development research, and having that data be sales and marketing actionable and not just data for the sake of having data, right? And so we saw an opportunity there to be able to say, okay, well, if we can maximize sales efficiency and sales effectiveness, that's really all sales and marketing people and business owners really want. They don't want to spend time, hours and hours and hours processing data, churning through data, qualifying data. They want to sell and grow their business. And so if we can shorten the time frame from here's information and here's how to use it as it pertains to your business, then we have a real value proposition that, you know, can help businesses scale and grow no matter the team size. And so that's why we injected machine learning to be able to say, okay, instead of manually reading and processing press releases and stuff to try to find a signal in the market, we'll just let the machine learning and AI do that for you. And we'll just present you those signals and triggers and say, okay, well, this company is heading into design and prototype stage. Right around that time is where they're going to start to look at regulatory strategy, cybersecurity stuff, and, you know, all that stuff. So now's a good time to connect with that type of company, right? And so that's kind of the gap we saw. We saw like tools trying to be combined to create what is Zapyrus. And so we just created the thing that combines everything into one.
Trevor, what do you think about from pharma versus MedTech and cybersecurity? You agree like we're 5 years behind? Because it seems like, at least in the United States, the FDA is just now starting to require things that should have been required quite some time ago from a cybersecurity lens.
Yeah, and I mean, we can even think about some of the main standards that we adhere to, like IEC 62304 is focused on secure development in medical devices, and its latest version of it's from 2006. So I completely agree. I think that a lot of these, especially regulatory problems, fall to the back end. Regulatory moves famously slow no matter what, but I feel like especially in the healthcare industry, it can move even slower since there's less room for error. But it seems to be especially pronounced with medical devices. Yeah.
It's cool. So what we see in the market, right? I don't know if you guys read our recent financial report for the H1 2025 of this year in the MedTech space. If you haven't, I'll send it to you after. Super interesting, because I think what investors and what the market likes is certain, like security, cybersecurity, no pun intended, but yes, security in terms of predictability in the market. And so what people thought would be, will make the market chaotic in terms of the IVDR and MDR update, updating the regulation in the EU side. People thought like, okay, it's going to stifle innovation. It's going to make it slower to go to market. Investors are going to be more shy towards, investing in the European market. Well, what our data showed was actually the opposite. In this past quarter, Q2, Europe surpassed North America in terms of rate of growth in financial investment in MedTech. And that's off of the updated IVDR and MDR regulatory update on some of the software as medical device stuff, but also traditional medical device and IVD. It's because of that stability of like, okay, we know what the regulations are now, and now we feel comfortable in investing that dollar in there. And I think once the FDA kind of catches up and stabilizes their decisions around, okay, what are we going to do for software as a medical device purely, or connected devices from a cybersecurity regulation standpoint, it should flip back in terms of like investment dollars coming back into the US over the next 3 quarters. But the data is super interesting. We wouldn't have guessed that, right? In terms of like, upper regulation, more investment into that market. But the data is showing us otherwise. It's seeing the money flow to Europe.
So the fact that the U.S. is a little more volatile, and we've also had like a presidential change and a few other things that might affect the dynamic. Some layoffs at the FDA.
Lots of regulatory changes, lots of general changes in the US.
Yeah, and then it's a good point. I know the FDA kind of leads the forefront with cybersecurity, but just in June of 2025, they finally finalized their cybersecurity guidance that was in draft from September of 2023. So, almost 2 years later, it took them to finalize something.
Yeah, the pace is it's interesting in the in the healthcare space, right? The medical device space. Because for us, cybersecurity is top of mind as a data company. It's like number one, right? Because we're always thinking about that. We're like, what if we have a security breach? We're a SaaS platform. What if, how do we control client data versus market data, right? Like how we ensure, so we hire pen testers permanently to constantly try to breach our systems. We have cybersecurity just top of mind always because of that. And with the emergence of large language models in the past couple of years, right, with the whole ChatGPT stuff, Google doing their thing, it's really opened up traction for connected devices and pure software as medical devices in the MedTech space. And that has really fueled the growth in the MedTech market. And so we're seeing cybersecurity be top of mind for a lot of people, right? Especially if they're updating their, quote unquote, dumb devices to smarter devices and, pushing data to the cloud, they have to cross that bridge. And the sooner they cross that bridge, the better they are, because investors are asking us those questions. They're like, if you want to connect to the cloud, what's going on with your cybersecurity plan? Like, how are you going to ensure that that is not going to get leaked, or, patient data is not going to go sideways? So it's here to stay, I think, and it's just going to be a bigger and bigger market in the MedTech space.
Well, it's good to hear your perspective on that, because I feel, maybe because I'm so in touch with cybersecurity, I kind of feel the opposite, that even if you're a software as a medical device with some sort of AI, let's say image enhancement, like cybersecurity is often the last thing thought of from the timeline people come to us. And I've sat through a lot of innovator pitches to investors that I've never, not once, seen cybersecurity on a roadmap.
Because it's new. Because you guys are in an innovative space right now that is new and it's young, right? When medical devices were coming to market for the first time in its inception, there were no minimal regulation, right? And then until a freak incident happens, then all of a sudden people are like, okay, wait, slow down. We're not gonna approve anything else until we sort out how do we gate this thing so that incident doesn't happen again. Similar to cybersecurity right now, right? When I was doing liquid biopsy, everybody was trying to bring new cancer liquid biopsy testing to the market. And then it's not until one company that broke through had an adverse event or had a misdiagnosis and then got a patient enrolled in a therapy that they shouldn't be on. It's where the FDA was like, whoa, wait, we're not approving any more liquid biopsy technology until you can show and demonstrate clinical evidence in this capacity. We're not allowing you to sell anything else. And so then the market kind of calmed down a little bit. And now clinical readiness is now top of mind for any new company going that route, right? So imagine like a company like Neuralink, brain-computer interface, right? Company. Imagine something happened, adverse event happened, there's a data leak or something that happened digitally. That can't happen in a brain-computer interface company that's worth, valuated at billions of dollars. Like that's just not a thing. And so I think people will smarten up early, and then investors are more cautious than ever before as well. So it's going to drive the need to solve that earlier. What we're seeing in the market is that there are fewer companies in the market that are getting funding, but the amount of funding dollars towards funded companies are increasing. And the amount of financial investments into the MedTech market is increasing by a lot. So that means investors are moving away from, especially VCs, they're moving away from the model of, hey, spray and pray, let's invest in 20 companies and hopefully one unicorn emerges and we get our ROI back. They're saying, actually, let's scale that down to 10 strategic ones. And we should just double down on those 10 strategic ones and put even more money into those. And so they're going to be asking harder questions to those early stage CEOs to say, what is your cybersecurity plan? What is your reimbursement strategy? What is all of that stuff needs to be front loaded now before they make an initial investment. And so it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they're going to need to address that earlier on.
I feel like cybersecurity sort of gets treated like insurance, where it's not something that anyone thinks about. It's not something that anyone cares about until something goes wrong. That's the only point where cybersecurity becomes, I guess, immediately at the forefront of people's mind. Oftentimes when we're talking to prospects or clients and they're coming to us, sometimes we're seeing people come years in advance to talk about cybersecurity. And I'll ask sometimes, why are you coming in so early into this process? And more often than not, they go, oh, I've worked for security companies in the past. I know what can happen. Or, oh, I was part of a healthcare data breach, something like that, where they've seen the downstream effects. So they get the severity. So they're coming in a little bit earlier. But if you haven't seen that, it might not be at the front of mind. And so I think Christian and I are a little bit close to the problem where it's all we do all day, every day. So we go, of course, why wouldn't you only think about this? Why wouldn't this always be at the front of your mind? But for a lot of a lot of manufacturers, they haven't been exposed to it.
Well, plus they have a lot of other things to figure out also.
Yeah. You guys have the same problem as we do, sort of, where we get a lot of the inbounds that we get or the clients that we get coming to us are the ones that are too late. It's like, oh my gosh, we're not hitting our targets. And so now we're going to look for some stuff mid-year. And it's like, well, this is not a magic bullet. You got to proactively build out your processes so that, you future-proof kind of your commercial strategy a little bit there, right? Don't come to us mid-year and be like, help us hit our targets towards the end of this year. It's like, okay, let's talk about the next year. Let's implement it now.
So that's what when people come to you, that's when they come to us. It's like to break the glass and pull the alarm kind of thing at the last minute.
Yeah. And we run into the same thing. We're like, well, when we talk to a new client, we're like, okay, think about it. I know it's working now. You got word of mouth traction as you're growing, right? You got word of mouth traction, your conferences are converting. You've got website visits. It's great. It's good to hit your target this year. If you've got a growth rate, if you want to double or triple growth in the next couple of years, you have to kind of future-proof your commercial strategy. Going to conferences again is not going to hit a doubling of growth target. So you got to slowly build and add to your repertoire proactively, not within that year. And you're like, okay, well, it's June now and we didn't see our, first half conversion. So now what do we do? It's kind of like chicken or the egg type thing. So I see flashbacks when you mention your problem. I see flashbacks to my problem too.
I think we've had a couple fairly recent scenarios that have come up that I hope will help drive the importance of cybersecurity and consider it sooner than later. One of them was the Illumina case. That was the first case, I think one of the first cases where somebody blatantly lied about their cybersecurity controls and got a device into an environment. And the other one was a healthcare app that had AI on it, and the AI told a suicidal patient after a few months to go ahead and kill themselves, and the patient did kill themselves. So we've got a couple of cases in the limelight that I think will help bring cybersecurity to the forefront. You want to elaborate a little bit on those cases, Trevor, and what your thoughts are?
Definitely. I think the Illumina one is especially interesting, even if it's a little bit less dramatic, since there was no proven vulnerability in the system. It wasn't that there was some big breach or big hack that led to an investigation on how that happened. A whistleblower came forward saying that Illumina, recognized there were vulnerabilities in a product that they were selling on the market. That was all it took. And so there was no way, no one was able to prove that the vulnerabilities were actually in effect and present and, dangerous in the use case. It was just that Illumina was not addressing this securely, and it came under the False Claims Act. So they were essentially falsifying evidence of cybersecurity compliance to the FDA. So then the FDA came in with the Department of Justice, and Illumina ended up settling in the case. But it was quite a big undertaking and a little bit of a disruption, especially since Illumina has historically had some problems with cybersecurity and regulatory in the past. So a little bit of a complicated problem there.
Well, what's also interesting about that is we have quite a few clients, and several of them came to us after the Illumina case, and they're like, "Are we doing our due diligence?" And we do our due diligence all along, but we would give pushback like, "Well, this is really a vulnerability you need to fix." And now they're finally coming to us saying, "Have we fixed enough? We don't want to be like, in the news like Illumina was." So it's worked in our favor because people are now taking the things we say seriously. Like, you need to fix this critical or high vulnerability because it could affect a patient.
Conversations went from like good enough to what is the absolute maximum security we can put in this device. We got to make it like the Alcatraz of medical devices.
That's what I mean. Like, you need to be thinking about, especially if you're bringing a, high risk device to market, right? Like, it's not like a class 1 device. You're bringing a class 3 device to market. You got to be thinking about patient safety, and like, you got to be doing your due diligence to maximize the safety of that device from a physical engineering standpoint, but also from a digital standpoint. Especially if you've got, machine learning in there that maybe connects to your, you got a smart drug delivery IV unit, right? That is like monitoring your heart rate, monitoring all these vital signs, and it's adapting the dosage of the drug in response to all the measurements of the wearable device that you have. And so there's data flows all over the place between the wearable device to that instrumentation to the processing cloud engine, then drive it back down if it's not a local software that's, making that determination, if it's doing it, off device. All of that stuff can be breached, and then one error could like overdose the patient. They could be impacted from OD on a drug medication. So now what? Like, if that happens, right? And that's scary. That's scary stuff. If you're a large company, maybe like you have one incident, you have a dip in your revenue because of that, or a dip in investment, you might be able to still survive. If you're a small, medium-sized company, an incident like that could basically bankrupt your entire company, like, especially when more and more competitors come to market, like we're seeing in MedTech. If you're a monopoly, fine, there's nowhere else to go. But if there's 10 other solutions that people could turn to, and that's where it's headed, is like the market becomes more and more competitive, right? Then you can't afford a mess up like that.
You want to elaborate a little bit about that AI case, Trevor? Because I think we talked about that on one episode we recorded.
It's interesting how problems are coming up in AI and in a large language model, such as the example that you were talking about. There are so many different controls and considerations that go into AI that are so new. I don't think that people fully understand exactly how it works and how to best use it at this point. And this is going to be the same with any new technology. It takes a while to fully understand what are the problems with it, what are the limitations, what is, the effective use of this in a clinical environment. Is this even the appropriate use case to begin with? I know, living in San Francisco, every single billboard is saying something about AI, but I actually do see on the way, going right down that way, I see this ad about AI therapists, and I see them all over the place. And you really have to be careful, if you're taking in sensitive information about an individual, what is it doing with that information? How is it responding? Is it learning? Is it changing based on that information? How do you know if it's changing in a good way or in a bad way? There's so many considerations just with AI safety before even getting into security that can be really, really important to think about. Then, of course, moving into security, AIs are processing a lot of very sensitive information. How are you able to control the training set? Where is it storing this information? What knowledge bases is it pulling out of? Is it pulling out of intentionally malicious knowledge bases? There's a lot that can go into an AI model. And I know we always talk about the garbage in, garbage out concept when it comes to AI. And I think that especially when you're dealing with something sensitive, something medical, you need to have only really high, clean quality going into your AI. Otherwise, you run the risk of something bad like that happening.
Are there actually signs that say AI therapy? Or, you can like call a number to talk to an AI therapist there, or are you just making it up?
100% serious. I'll take a picture next time I go buy one.
I think that's way too premature, especially based on that case where the AI told the patient go ahead and kill themselves. I don't think we know enough about AI to implement it in that sort of environment. I think the risk is way too high personally.
Just because they could doesn't mean they should.
Cool. And what do you think about, it sounds like you use machine learning and AI quite a bit. I mean, your model is different. It's used for market intelligence and sales enablement versus recommending therapy, being a therapist for a patient. What do you think about where we are with AI and MedTech? Kevin, do you think it's too premature, or do you think we're ready for it?
I think it's changing very quickly that regulators have a hard time keeping up with any regulation. You almost have to, as a founder or a leader of a medtech company, you almost have to take the ownership and put the patient first and take the proactive steps to ensure that you have proper measures in place. You almost need to self-regulate to some extent so that you allow time for a slow-moving organization like the FDA to kind of catch up, because it's changing so quickly. And I think you guys know this. From large language models is one component of it, but it's changing so quickly. Even traditional, machine learning algorithms. Anything you connect digitally is open for exposure. So, and the rate of computing power is just increasing. And so because of that, it makes it easier to penetrate into any piece of software, any piece of digitized intel, right? So I think on the innovation side, we're definitely ready for it. It's going to speed up innovation. It's going to make devices smarter, like traditional devices, smarter. In terms of, are companies ready to be responsible for turning that stuff on? I'm not sure if the regulation is up to spec yet, and if they don't have a mechanism to continuously update it more frequent than traditional methods, then we might see a lot of real world cases play out more and more in the market, right? Because regulation in the drug space, right? From the chemistry background, I could say that, it takes a while to develop a new molecule that can biochemically interact with the human body as an active pharmaceutical ingredient that treats a disease or manages a symptom of some sort. The rate of innovation from a hard science standpoint is slow enough where the regulation can keep up with that pace of progression. In the pharma space, they can't connect with AI. They can connect it maybe through drug discovery platform, but that's not impacting the patient in terms of making meaningful disease changes to the patient, right? But in the device space, device technology is an engineering problem, not a chemistry problem. And so AI can integrate with hardware quite nicely there. And because of that, the rate of software progression is much faster than hardware, and hardware is much faster than technical science and physics and biochemistry. And that's where I think the challenge is going to be in regulators trying to keep up with the changes in the different versions of how smart AI is now and the computational power. Just look at what NVIDIA is doing, I think. Just whatever they're doing is going to speed up computational power, which is going to expose more on the cybersecurity front.
I think it's pretty interesting how the growth of computational power is just so exponential. It's, I can't remember the rule, but it's like 10 times increase every 2.7 years, something like that. It is taking off at a pretty incredible rate, and talking about how complexity can affect this. Something that we always talk about with network security, and counterintuitively, it's often easier to find bigger problems and bigger vulnerabilities in bigger companies. Some of the most severe vulnerabilities that I've ever found during penetration tests were against, Fortune 500 companies, because there are so many different components and they have such complicated systems. It just takes one problem, one mispatch, one misconfiguration across, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of network devices, compared to if you only have 5. It's a lot easier to keep track of them and secure them. And so I think that it can apply to a single device when you have multiple components, multiple technologies, and a wide range of complexity there. More complexity isn't always a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, on the Canadian side, the federal government just announced a huge investment into AI and cybersecurity. Like, they've invested in the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, separate from Health Canada. So, like, different countries are responding to this differently, right? Yeah. Speaking from the Canadian side, where I think our government is investing in that and making it forefront, right? Because that'll impact voting fraud, that'll impact all sorts of stuff, right? Not just on the MedTech side, but obviously that unit, that Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, is going to then help Health Canada also regulate medical technologies from a cybersecurity side of things as well, or at least demand them to update their terms.
I wanted to talk about timing here, to change the topic a little bit. So, because you brought up a point, Kevin, where people come to you about Zapyrus or about sales enablement or market intelligence, like when it's almost too late, because it's not like in 2 weeks you can turn something around. It's a long process, and you have to have the strategy behind it, behind the tool you're using as well. So when should somebody come to your organization to start looking at adding functionality and capability to their sales process?
Yeah, I think a good kind of indicator is that if you're looking to grow beyond word of mouth and repeat business, that's when you start to look at, do we need a CRM? Do we need a contacts tool? Do we need a database? Do we need more intelligence to help us scale out the team and future-proof the growth strategy, right? And also, when do you want to sell your company? And I'm speaking specifically to like small, medium-sized companies or medium-sized companies that are looking to grow larger, right? Because investors look for, okay, what am I buying? Am I buying the founder, or am I buying a proven out process and system? And so they're looking at those systems, and we're selling to large companies all the time. A lot of large companies use us. And so they're going to look at, okay, well, large companies have established kind of best practices to grow and scale and be sustainable long-term. And so if these medium companies that want to be acquired by larger companies, or PE firms that want to combine them, they're going to look at, okay, what are your systems like, and would they even integrate with these other companies we're looking to combine and purchase? And so if you want to eventually sell your company and kind of future-proof your growth beyond just growing word of mouth and going to conferences, that's when you should start looking into the buyers and start to look into a solution like ours. If you're just happy with not, you're like, hey, we're good, just trying to keep the lights on here, we're not looking to, grow and scale this thing, or then you probably don't need any tool. You probably just, rely on your repeat business and referrals and things like that, and you're probably good. And we see a lot of that in the MedTech space from companies that, are like 20 years old and they have 10 employees. Like, that's a signal for us that they're probably not interested in hyper growth or in growing that organization.
I wonder what the percentages of companies that, as you said, just want to keep the lights on, or 20 years old with 10 people, versus the companies that are trying to scale very quickly.
I think there is a market pressure that we've seen over the past 3 years of consolidation in the space. We saw that in the biopharmaceutical space 5 years ago. We're seeing that in MedTech now, right? You're seeing that across the board. Like you saw Avania form between 3 different companies, like Avania, the clinical CRO in MedTech. You saw MCRA just got purchased by IQVIA. That's a consolidation, right? You saw Matrix One, Gillen Data got acquired by a PE firm with Matrix requirements. Now they merge into one company that combines solutions. So we're seeing consolidation in the market, and that consolidation is going to make it more competitive against those smaller shops that only do one thing and that are just coasting. And so if they don't future proof, even if they're like, oh, we're fine right now, they're going to take that client that you're relying on repeat business with, and then now you're forced to hunt. And by that time, it could be too late, right? And so we're going to see a lot of those smaller folks that are just have been stagnant over the past 5 to 10 years. They're probably going to close down shop. We're seeing some of them already close down shop. They're not just because they have a large enough book of business. They've never built the process that makes it attractive to purchase and consolidate with other companies. And so, yeah, consolidations, I think, is going to shift the market towards basically tightening up your shit from a commercial strategy and commercial tooling.
Yeah, I get approached by firms all the time wanting to acquire Blue Goat. And often they're saying, we have this portfolio, we want to consolidate our capabilities. And I'm not interested in selling, but I want to build a business that's scalable and has processes where it's not relying on me, obviously. But I also think there's value in being super niche in what you offer versus offering everything, because I have found in the past that you can't be super great at offering everything. You can be a little bit good at most of those things versus being really good if you just do one thing very well.
Yeah. And I think the difference between you guys is like, you're really great at doing something in the niche, but you're interested in growth. That's like the differentiator. Some businesses are not interested in growth. I've seen in the metal.
Well, as they say, if you're not growing, you're dying in business. That's kind of like
that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm like, what? I'm like, how do you? Anyway, we've seen a handful. It's not the majority, thankfully. It's the minority, right? And it's the minority for a reason. Like you pick a market. If that's kind of your approach to business in any market, you're eventually gonna die. I mean, just look at the restaurant market, right? Restaurants that don't look to grow will then be outcompeted by the ones that do look to grow on the same street, right? Like all of a sudden, like nobody's going to that restaurant that was popular, a year ago.
And I know in cybersecurity, we always say people should come to us. Trevor does say early and often, kind of like what you're advocating, Kevin. I guess it depends on your strategy, though. For us, it depends on strategy, too. If you want to get approved sooner than later by the FDA or whichever regulatory authority from a cybersecurity perspective, the sooner you come to us, the more likely you'll get approved quicker than your competitors at less expense and less frustration.
Yeah. And it also increases your chance of future investments too, because investors are seeing that as like, oh, that's no longer a risk for concern, right? A cause for concern. Like, oh, they've got that figured out. They're already talking about that. It's the same thing as like human factors engineering, right? Doing that early will avoid any setback around like you're trying to then go to clinical and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's not how people use that product in a real case setting. It's like, okay, let's go back and now do the human factors. Like, well, now you could have started your clinical study, but now you got to wait a year out and then you're burning cash, your runway's narrowing, and all of a sudden that technology never makes it to market because you made one decision to not, dot your I's and cross your T's early enough.
We've seen with cybersecurity companies, I think our longest set of delays that we've ever seen a company come to us with was around 12 months of FDA delays from cybersecurity. And this was a really big company. They had, money to go through this process. They had the runway, they large publicly traded company with a wide range of products. This was not going to be the end of the world for them. It's frustrating, it's difficult, but they got through it. Now, imagining a similar situation with a startup where, everything's on a shoestring budget and they're trying to make everything work and getting delayed for a full year, that can kill companies like that just from a cybersecurity problem.
Oh yeah, like these startups, I was in one. The cash runway is not long. It's like a couple months out. Like if you don't raise in like 6 months, you're out. Like you can't pay your employees. You got to pause R&D. You got to lean out before you can scale out again. So it's like this endless cycle of like how much runway you have with this round you just raised. And what are you going to do in that time period to ensure that you raise the next round? And if you don't mitigate your risks, people don't want to invest in you in the next round, then you run out of time and cash.
Yeah, if you haven't proven yourself in a prior round, why would somebody invest in you in the next round, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, we're coming up on time here, so I usually ask, if anyone has any last thoughts, parting words, or last questions here. So I'll start with Trevor first, and throw it over to you, Kevin.
I'm going to go with the classic on this, and that's just consider your cybersecurity early and often. Leaving it to the end, that's when you're getting these big delays. That's when you're facing all of these regulatory hurdles, which doesn't need to be that way. If you're addressing cybersecurity early, you're designing your device safely and securely, you're going to have all of the evidence of that inherently, and then you aren't going to run into these regulatory problems. So early and often.
We got to get you to say something more original next time. All right. What about you, Kevin? Any last minute questions or parting words of wisdom?
I agree with Trevor in terms of cybersecurity thing, right? Early and often, just like any strategic work, I think early and often is good to check in on. I guess I should probably say something about Zapyrus. Words of wisdom. Let me see. I think if you want to stop banging your head around testing, different tools and trying to figure out scaling out your commercial plan long term, and you just want a one-stop shop solution to scale your MedTech business growth if you're a MedTech service provider, we're really your CRM's best friend. So it's just us and your CRM. That's all you really need. I would consider it. If not us, I would definitely consider a streamlined solution that can help you with sales research automation to maximize your sales efficiency and effectiveness.
All right, I like it. And we at BlueGoat, we use Zapyrus, and it's a great tool. I think that the aspect that a lot of people neglect, though, you can have all these great tools, but if you don't have a process or a strategy in how to incorporate the information from Zapyrus, for instance, into your sales process, and your sales team knows how to do that, then the tool is only going to be so valuable. So you have to have that behind the scenes strategy as well. At least that's what I found, because I'm very process driven. I feel like anything should be that I want to scale my business, there should be a process, and it should be repeatable and scalable and trainable to a new person that joins the team.
I take the same philosophy, right? Like you can give a drill to an expert carpenter and you can give a drill to a DIYer, two different results. It's the same drill, the same torque, the same everything, right? So it's about how you use it, when you use it, what you use it for, all of that is part of that. And we take pride in having the support team to be able to get online with users and be able to help customize strategy and implementation plans towards their specific team needs.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Kevin, for joining us today. We appreciate your time. And thanks, Trevor, for tuning in from California. And I'm glad you got your new driver's license or whatever you got over there.
It's finally over.
And thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Med Device Cyber Podcast. We hope to see you on the next one.